Hello everyone, today we're going to go through a game between two titans of the chess world, Peter Svidler and Michael Adams. Now Svidler commentates for Chess24, I really enjoy his commentary and he seems like such a nice guy, and perhaps this could be his best game ever. And he's white here and he's playing against an English Grandmaster, Michael Adams, who's possibly the best English Grandmaster England's ever seen. He's known for his positional style of play and he's won the British Championships many times. I would actually rank him higher than Nigel Shaw in terms of consistency over the years, definitely. So here Peter Svidler is white, Adams is black, and this was played in the year 2000, and Svidler played e4, Adams plays e5, and we get into a Rye Lopez with bishop b5 and a6. So Svidler plays bishop to a4 and Adams now plays knight to f6, attacking this e4 pawn, and here white castles. So in this opening, what happens if black captures here on e4? Well, white can now play d4, undermining the centre, and once b5 is played, bishop retreats to b3, and there's a variety of moves. So if black now takes on d4, rook e1 can be played, and after d5, a move like knight c3 becomes really good here. So if black takes this knight, just bishop captures, and black is in quite a busted position here. You wouldn't want to play black right now. Here bishop e6 can be played, but then just comes knight takes e4, d takes and rook takes, and again black is in such a bad position that you wouldn't want to play this. Instead of the bishop b3, instead of capturing here, black could play d5, then just comes d takes e5 and bishop to e6, and material is even. Both players have developed their pieces with equal material, so it can be played, but it's quite risky for black. So here Adams actually played bishop c5, and here white plays c3. So the idea here is to play bishop to c2, followed by moves like d3, knight bd2, rook e1, and maybe knight to f1 in some cases, knight to e3 and knight to g3, and gain on this f5 square at some point. So here black now plays b5, attacking his bishop, and as we see it retreats to c2, protecting the e4 pawn and just hiding out for a while, just hanging out there for a bit. It becomes very active in a later game. Here black plays d6. I like Svidler's move here because I've struggled in this type of position before. I probably would have played something like h3 to stop bishop g4, but I guess just bishop b7 is decent enough for black, and they've achieved equality. So d3, maybe just castles and rook e1, rook e8 and knight bd2. We get into this position. This is all very standard stuff and it's anyone's game at the moment. I suppose black's plan is also to retreat this bishop to b6 followed by c5 at some point, and white's plan is to play knight f1, e3, play a4 moves, maybe d4 at some point when the option becomes available. So it's anyone's game here and it's been played hundreds of times. Instead of h3 though, I think Svidler played a good move. He played a4, undermining this b5 pawn. And black now plays bishop to g4, so this is what happens as a consequence of not playing h3. This bishop can become very powerful. I've had a game where I've suffered a heavy loss due to this bishop. So here Svidler played d3, hoping to play knight bd2 to reinforce this knight. A takes b5 was an interesting option as well. So if a takes, we can play rook takes a8, queen takes a8, and now play h3. And we get into some interesting positions after bishop h5. And if white now forces the issue with g4, black's got two options here. He could play bishop g6 hoping for a quiet game, which is what I think Adams might have played. And after d4, e takes d4, takes, and bishop retreats, knight c3, we're in quite an even position again, and it's anyone's game again. Interestingly though, knight takes g4 is an option for black. After h takes, bishop takes, the pin's maintained and white could be struggling slightly. But after castles, rook h1, h5, it's hard to see has black got enough compensation for that piece. I don't think he does, so that's very risky to play that move. It's great in blitz games but not so much in classical chess. Here though, Svidler played d3, so hoping to play knight bd2. Black castled and now he plays h3, bishop h5, and again we can see this g4 move again. So if knight takes g4, h takes, bishop takes, a takes b, we can get the queen offside onto a8. So again after king g2, queen d8 to get the queen back in the game, rook h1. Maybe queen f6 to attack this knight. Knight bd2 comes in to save the day. So again, is this worth a piece? I'll let you decide, but I personally don't think it is. Instead of the h3, Adams played bishop h5, and now Svidler just plays knight bd2, very calm move, protecting this knight on f3. And here black now plays b4, attacking the c3 pawn, and I like Svidler's move very much, plays a5. What this does is just isolates this b4 pawn, and just puts black under a bit more pressure. This a6 pawn now is very weak too, so this could be attacked. Especially after black now plays rook b8 to reinforce this b4 pawn. a6 is very vulnerable, and for this reason Svidler now plays queen to e2. So once d4 comes, the a6 pawn's under threat. Adams took on c3 here and Svidler recaptures. And black now opens the position up a bit, plays d5. Now taking that d5 pawn will be very risky because the knight will recapture and it's just coming into the position. So for this reason d4 is now played, attacking the bishop. Now black could actually play bishop takes d4 here, interestingly. But c takes d, knight takes and queen d1. Black can now play d takes e4, so he's gaining some pawn material for the piece. But after knight takes e4, bishop takes f3, g takes, and now knight d5 recommended by the computer. White's a piece up, and black does have some compensation, but again, is it worth it? White's position's a bit rubbish to say the least. He's got double f pawns, and is 2 pawns down for the piece, so it's very interesting, very double-edged, but white does have the 2 bishops. So again, I think I prefer white, to be honest. The piece is a piece at the end of the day. Instead of d4, Adams now captures on d4, and because c takes d4 and knight takes d4 just looks terrible for white because of that pin from the bishop on h5, Svidler now plays queen takes a6, attacking this knight, and Adams captures on c3 with the d pawn. Queen d6 is also another option here, but then could follow e5. If knight takes e5, queen takes d6, and bishop takes, knight takes d4, so there's not like too much difference. If c5, knight f5 and bishop g6, white can now actually play the great move here. He can play knight to e4, so both knights are attacking this bishop on d6. So whichever one black takes, white will just capture the bishop on d6. If bishop takes f5, here just comes knight takes f6, and g takes and bishop takes f5. So tactics are in white's favour after knight e4. If d takes, knight takes d6, and if knight takes e4, just bishop takes e4, and if takes, you can just take again. So it all works well for white in this type of position. So queen d6 was an option, but Adams didn't go for this. He played d takes c3. I think it's the correct move. So after queen takes c6, c takes d2. Svidler now captures on d2 with the knight. Queen takes c5 was also an option, but after d takes c1, gets a queen, takes there, bishop takes f3, g takes, knight h5. After queen takes d5 and queen h4, it's very unclear who's actually on top. It gives black a slight edge according to Stockfish, but I don't know, I personally prefer white's position here, but I know that knight f5 looks very dangerous. This queen's attacking this pawn, so white's got to be very careful. Again, I think Svidler played the correct move. Knight takes d2 just simplifies everything. It's a lot more easy to play. So bishop d4 from Adams, and now rook lift from Svidler, rook a4, attacking the bishop. So if the bishop moves back, white could play e5 here, attacking the knight and opening this bishop on c2 up. But luckily, black's actually saved here with a great move, because if knight d7 to move it away, white just wins a pawn. But look at this, there's this move queen d7, and white's got to either swap queens or move the queen away, and this should be fine for black. Instead though, after rook a4, d takes e4 is played by black, and Svidler recaptures on e4, knight takes e4. Now I personally would think queen takes will be a better move here, and that's probably what I would have played, because after bishop g6 we can play rook takes d4. We get into a very interesting position. If bishop captures, rook captures on d8, bishop takes c2, and rook d7. White's got a slight edge here. So he's got to protect that pawn, but then just comes bishop f4. And I have to move like rook b4, just rook c1. And if we capture and play h5 to stop any back ranks, rook a2, you have to say white's doing a bit better here. It looks very drawish, but it would be nice to go into this endgame, I would think. Instead, Svidler actually captures with the bishop, which is again fair enough. It keeps the position more complicated. Bishop g6 is a move that black could play, but bishop d5 and black's really struggling now. The bishop on d4 is attacked, so it moves back, but then just comes bishop e3, and after captures and queen g5. Queen c5 threatens bishop takes f7 with a check, so the queen's forced to get protected from the h pawn. But then just comes rook g4, and now black's under a lot of pressure. This diagonal is really making black suffer. Queen h5 can be played, and then just comes a6. So how is black going to stop white from queening that a pawn? So in this type of position, after bishop takes e4, black's got to be very careful indeed. Adams plays bishop e2, which is the correct move to play. But we get into this nice variation now. So if bishop takes h7 is played by Svidler with check. So what this does is if king takes h7, just play queen e4, king g8 and queen takes e2, and white's won an extra pawn. So after bishop takes h7, black's forced to play king h8. And now Svidler retreats his bishop to c2. Queen e4 is another move that's an option, attacking the bishop and protecting the bishop on h7. And we're also attacking this bishop on d4. So if rook e8, queen takes d4, queen takes d4, rook takes d4, black can actually win the exchange when bishop takes f1. And white's best move now is to play rook h4. If rook e1 from black, bishop d2, rook a1, bishop c3, rook c1. So this is rather complicated, so I guess this is why Svidler didn't actually play queen e4. The computer actually gives white as winning here, but queen e4 here goes into complications. So Svidler again just plays it simply, bishop c2. So what happens now if Adams takes on f1? Well, now he can play queen e4. King takes f1 is also an option. Then could come rook e8. And queen f3 is given to attack this f7, king g8, queen d3, c5 to protect the bishop. And if queen h7, king f8, check, king e7. It's an even game, but white's the exchange down, so I don't see why you'd want to go into this. Instead, after bishop takes f1, queen e4 looks like a better move, threatening mate as well. So after f5, take on d4, takes. So bishop goes back to e2, and now rook bishop to a3. The computers actually give this position as dead even, so I actually think bishop takes f1 should have been played by Adams, and I think it was a mistake not to take this rook, even though it looked really dodgy for black. Instead, Adams played rook e8, and I think this gives white an escape. He plays rook e1 now from Svidler, and rook e6 to attack the queen. Now, there's two options here, and Svidler played a very nice move. So rook takes d4 could be played, and after queen takes, just queen takes c7 attacking the rook. And if rook b e8, we can now take another pawn, so white's got two pawns and a piece for the rook. And after queen c3, rook takes e2 is given, rook takes e2, queen h5, so it's two bishops versus the two rooks. So bishop h7 here, king f8, queen f5, king e7, bishop g5 and king d6, and bishop f4 and king c6, followed by bishop g3. So who would you prefer here? White's got the two bishops and three more pawns, but black has the queen and two rooks. It would make for a very interesting endgame, but actually the computer actually gives white as slightly better, so that's very interesting. But again, Svidler actually plays a better move than rook takes d4 here. He sacrifices his queen, plays queen takes e6, amazingly enough. So he's given his queen up for a rook and the bishop on e2, so rook takes e2. Black reinforces the d4 bishop with e5, and now white just gets a pawn rolling, he plays a6. And I think black actually suffers here because he doesn't know what to do. I wouldn't really know what to do in this situation. Maybe rook a8 is an option here, but after bishop e3 and c5, Bishop takes d4, e takes d4 and bishop d3. White's actually doing much better. It looks as though black is, because he's got an extra queen. I think this is deceptive though, because this a6 pawn and this bishop on d3 are very powerful. And black's not got many options to win the game. After a6 though, queen d7's played. And Svidler just gets on with the job of playing a7, so he's sacking this rook. Rook a8. But now comes an amazing move by Svidler. I'll give you 5 seconds to see if you can figure it out. So amazingly here he plays rook takes e5. Such an amazing move. So if bishop now captures on e5, rook h4 can be played, king g8, and now bishop b3 check. The king's forced to f8, and after rook h8, king e7, throw in bishop g5 for fun, bishop f6, captures, the rook now takes on a8, and after queen to d4 let's say, just rook e8 check, king takes and get a queen, and white's now a piece and a pawn up and it's game over for black. So bishop takes e5 cannot be played. So instead black's now forced just to play a move like g6 to try and give the black king an escape square. Svidler now played rook e4, so ganging up on this bishop on d4, and c5's played to protect it and also gang up on this a7 pawn. White could now play rook h4 though. If king g8, just check on b3 again, king f8, and now white can amazingly take on d4 with the rook. And if they capture, we can play this check again, king g7 and just rook a8, and again white's doing much better and will win the game from here. Instead though, Svidler chose a sweeter option. He played rook a6 here, still a good move, and black now captures on a7, so gets that pawn finally off the board, but it's too little too late. White now just plays rook takes g6 and the threatening rook h4 check, so the queen will have to cover that. So black's forced to play bishop g7 to block this g file, but amazingly now bishop b2 can be played. So Svidler played just an amazing move there, and if bishop takes b2, rook h4, queen h7's forced, rook takes, and now just rook to b6. So the bishop on c2 is attacking this rook on h7 and also attacking the bishop on b2. So this amazing little trick wins the game. White also has 2 pawns extra, so it's an easy win from here. It's nice how all these combinations fit together. So bishop b2, Adams now plays queen to b5, and after bishop c3, Adams resigns. And I was thinking, why do you resign here? Well, it's because black just doesn't have any more options. Where do you go as black from here? If bishop takes c3, just rook h4, and if rook h7, again we get into this trap of rook takes, king takes and rook b6 check. So bishop on c2 is checking the king, and the rook will take the queen on the next move. So in this position there's just nothing to do. Rook e8's threatened as well if the queen ever moves off b5, and rook h6 also threatened, so there's just nowhere good for black to go, and for this reason Adams resigns. And I just thought this was a nice game by Svidler. So this queen sacrifice on e6 was just really impressive for 2 pieces, and it's just impressive how white used these 2 bishops to destroy black's defences, especially after this move queen d7 and a7 rook a8. This rook takes e5 move was really good and just shows some great calculation on Svidler's part. So what do you think? Could this be his best game? Let me know in the comments. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe if you did, and I'll see you in the next chess video.